You didn't click this by accident. Somewhere inside, a part of you is tired of the act. Tired of showing up as someone who's acceptable, predictable, comfortable to others, but almost unrecognizable to yourself. And you wouldn't say it out loud, not yet. But quietly, you've started asking dangerous questions. Questions like, is this all there is? Why does success feel so empty? What if I've been living the wrong life? You're not crazy. You're just waking up. Most people never do. Not because they're weak, but because they were taught to stay asleep. They were trained to color inside lines that were never drawn by them, to perform instead of feel, to obey instead of understand. From the beginning, it's the same pattern. Raise your hand. Stay in line. Don't ask why. Memorize, repeat, behave. And if you do it well enough, they'll call you smart. But you're not learning how to think. You're learning how to mimic. And the ones who question it, they get labeled difficult, weird, too much. So eventually, most people trade their inner fire for outer approval. They stop creating and start copying. They stop becoming and start performing. And at some point, they look in the mirror and realize they don't even know who's staring back. Not because life betrayed them, but because they betrayed themselves quietly, slowly, one small compromise at a time. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And if you ignore it long enough, it doesn't go away. It waits. And when it returns like a flood. You start noticing the cracks. In your relationships, your choices, your values. You start to see the gap between what you believe and how you live, between who you are and who you pretend to be. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is the moment most people run. Back to comfort, back to the familiar, back to the lie. But you didn't come here to fall back asleep. You came here to remember. Here's the truth that breaks most people. Truth is rarely comfortable. And comfort is rarely true. People say they want honesty, but what they really want is reassurance. They want certainty wrapped in kindness, lies dressed in nice words, a world that lets them stay asleep while pretending they're awake. And so they build soft little cages, careers that pay well but mean nothing, relationships that feel safe but say nothing, identities that earn applause but reveal nothing. And they call it stability. But stability without truth is just a beautiful trap. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it is to leave. Because now your safety is built on silence. Your identity is built on pretending. Your peace is built on not knowing. But truth? It doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't show up in soft tones and gentle timing. It shows up when you're finally alone, in the quiet hours, asking questions you used to avoid. And when it arrives, it brings everything you buried with it. Every fear, every contradiction, every unresolved ache. Most people panic when this happens. They medicate it, distract from it, drown it in noise. They run back to the fake because the fake is familiar, and the familiar feels safe even if it's killing them slowly. But if you can resist the urge to run, if you can sit in the discomfort without trying to escape, you'll notice something else. The pain isn't punishment. It's a signal. It's not there to break you. It's there to wake you. See, pain is honest. It doesn't lie. It shows you exactly where you're bleeding, where you're attached, where you've abandoned yourself in the name of being accepted. Nietzsche said it clearly, to live is to suffer, and to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. But meaning doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes when you stop running. When you face the truth you've been avoiding, the truth about who you are, who you're not, and what you need to finally let go of. And that's when the healing begins. Not when you feel better, but when you finally stop lying to yourself. There's something seductive about the crowd. It gives you the illusion of certainty. You don't have to think, just follow. You don't have to choose, just agree. You don't have to be honest, just be accepted. Feels like belonging, but it isn't. It's survival. Because the moment you start questioning, the moment you speak something real, something that contradicts the script, you feel the shift. The stares get colder, the silence gets louder, and suddenly you're not safe anymore. See, the crowd doesn't want truth. It wants harmony. Not the deep kind, the surface kind. The kind that keeps everything smooth on top, while rot grows underneath. And so most people obey. Not because they believe, but because they're afraid to be alone. They align their opinions with the loudest voice. They trade conviction for comfort. They mistake being echoed for being understood. But the crowd doesn't understand you. It only mirrors what it already believes. And the more you shrink to fit it, the more you disappear. Nietzsche said, "Insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, it is the rule." And he was right, because when you outsource your identity to the group, you stop being someone and start becoming something. A role, placeholder, a mask. And here's the tragedy. Most people don't realize this until the mask starts to crack. Until their spirit begins to ache. Until they've built a life on applause that suddenly feels empty. They followed what was popular, not what was true. They were loved by many, but known by none. And when the crowd finally turns, and it always does, they're left with nothing but the hollow echo of their own silence. So if you want to live a life that's truly yours, you will have to disappoint the crowd. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. And most people aren't brave enough to do that until it's too late. You were probably told to be kind, to be polite, agreeable, generous. And you listened. You tried to do the right thing. You kept the peace. You gave second chances. You softened your voice, shrunk your needs, bit your tongue, all in the name of being a good person. But here's the truth they didn't teach you. Kindness without strength makes you a target. Because not everyone sees your softness as virtue. Some see it as weakness. Some see it as an opening. Some see it as something to use. And they will. Not always with cruelty, but with appetite. Because the world doesn't reward your good intentions. It responds to your boundaries. Nietzsche wrote, "The weak are always forced to lie." Why? Because when you don't have strength, you don't have the freedom to be honest. You say yes when you want to say no. You act fine when you're falling apart. You tolerate what you should reject. Not because you don't feel it, but because you think you can't afford to lose love, or respect, or connection. But what kind of love requires your silence? What kind of peace demands your self-erasure? Peace without power isn't peace. It's submission. And most people don't see this. Not until they're used up. Not until they've been betrayed. Not once but a dozen times. By friends, by family, by the very people they kept choosing. And then they realize they were never really chosen in return. They were convenient, predictable, safe to disappoint. Because people treat you how you treat yourself. And if you don't protect your worth, they won't either. The answer isn't to become hard. It's to become whole. Kindness is powerful, but only when it's backed by strength. The kind of strength that says, "I will love you, but I will not betray myself to do it." Most people think discipline is about force, about pushing yourself through pain, grinding through the resistance, waking up early to prove something. But discipline isn't about punishment. It's about self-respect. See, motivation comes and goes. It's a feeling. It flares up when you're inspired, but it disappears the second life gets hard. And life will get hard. That's not a flaw in the system. That is the system. So if your action depends on your mood, you'll spend your life chasing sparks, instead of building fires. Discipline doesn't wait to feel ready. It remembers who you are, what you value, what kind of life you said you wanted, before you got tired. It's brushing your teeth. Not because it's exciting, but because you care about yourself enough to do the boring thing that protects your well-being. It's turning down the distraction, not because you're not tempted, but because your integrity matters more than your impulse. And most people only understand this after they've burned through years of false starts, after they've promised themselves 100 new beginnings, and broken them all quietly. They think they have a motivation problem, but what they really have is a respect problem, because you can't build a meaningful life while constantly betraying yourself in private. You can't expect self-trust. while abandoning the very commitments you make when no one's watching. Discipline isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters. When it matters. Especially when it's hard. The difference between who you are and who you say you want to be is found in those moments when you act from your values, not your feelings. And the more you choose that version of yourself, the more solid you become. Not perfect, but dependable. Not invincible, but real. Everyone loves the idea of you getting better until your growth costs them something. See, people will clap for your potential. They'll encourage your healing. They'll cheer you on, as long as your evolution doesn't disrupt their comfort. But the moment you start changing roles, the moment you stop shrinking to fit the version of you they're used to, something shifts. They don't say it outright. They don't have to. Suddenly, you're too distant, too intense, too focused. But what they're really saying is, you've stopped playing the part one liked you in. And that's when the truth shows up. They didn't love the real you. They loved the role you played in their story. Maybe you were the fixer, the quiet one, the dependable one who never made waves. And now here you are, setting boundaries, saying no, dreaming bigger. You're not breaking anything. You're just breaking pattern. And to people who benefited from the old version of you, that feels like betrayal. But it's not your job to stay small, just to keep other people comfortable. Growth will cost you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Because when you change the equilibrium. And those who depended on your silence, your compliance, your self-sacrifice, they'll feel it. Some will distance themselves. Some will talk about how you've changed. Some will try to guilt you back into place. And you'll be tempted to go back to approval, back to harmony, back to who you were before you made them uncomfortable. But that's not growth. That's regression in disguise. If your evolution costs you relationships that were built on your self-abandonment, let them go. The people meant for your future won't be afraid of your expansion. And the ones who are, they were never clapping for you, just the version of you that made them feel safe. Everyone has a shadow, not just the villains in stories, not just the ones who break things in public. You have one too, the version of you you weren't allowed to be, the anger that was too loud, the grief that was too inconvenient, the needs that made people uncomfortable. So you hid it, you silenced it, you locked it away and smiled like everything was fine. But what you suppress doesn't die. It grows. It seeps into your tone, into your choices, into your self-sabotage. It whispers doubts when things are finally going well. It lashes out when you're close to peace. Not because it wants to ruin you, but because it wants to be seen. You can't outrun the parts of yourself you've disowned. They will find you in failed relationships, in explosive moments, in all the ways you keep repeating what you swore you'd outgrow. Nietzsche and later Jung knew this. They didn't see the shadow as evil. They saw it as unintegrated. And that's the truth most people avoid. Your shadow doesn't need to be erased. It needs to be acknowledged. Imagine locking a child in the basement for years. No light, no conversation, just shame. What do you think happens? That child doesn't vanish. They become loud. They become unpredictable. They act out, because neglect turns into chaos. Your shadow is the same. The more you pretend it's not there, the more power it gains behind the scenes. But once you face it, once you listen to it without judgment, once you bring light into that basement, you realize it was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to protect the parts of you no one else would. The strongest version of you is not the one who hides your darkness. It's the one who knows it and walks with it, not as an enemy, but as an ally. People think people-pleasing is kindness. It's not. It's fear. Fear dressed in friendliness. It looks generous. It sounds polite, passes as compassion. But underneath, it's rooted in one question. Will you still want me if I'm honest? So you become careful with your words. You overthink every message. You say yes when you mean no, because the alternative feels dangerous. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to be misunderstood. You don't want to be alone. So you compromise, not once but over and over, small edits to your truth, until the performance becomes the personality. And that's when it happens. You wake up surrounded by people and feel completely invisible. Because when you live to please, people fall in love with the version of you that doesn't exist. They like your silence, your agreement, your reliability, but they don't know your depth, your rage, your desire. And if they don't know those things, how can they ever truly love you? Nietzsche didn't believe truth required approval. He believed it required sacrifice, because authenticity has a cost, and often that cost is connection. But here's the paradox. The more you perform to stay close to others, the further you drift from yourself, until one day you're standing in a room full of people, thinking, none of these people know me, because I never let them. And when your real voice finally rises, not the polite one, the honest one, don't be surprised when some people leave. Let them. The ones who stay, they're not staying for your performance. They're staying because you finally showed them. You followed the rules. You checked the boxes. You played the part. School, career, partner, stability. You did everything they told you to do. And still, something feels off. It's not depression. Not quite. It's not burnout. Not exactly. It's this quiet ache. This low hum of emptiness. You can't explain. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. Maybe even impressive. But on the inside, you feel like a ghost, haunting a life you were supposed to love. Nietzsche warned us, doing everything right can still lead you to the wrong life. Because right by whose definition? Right for the system? For the crowd? For the version of you that just wanted to be accepted? The truth is, you can obey every expectation and still abandon yourself completely. That's what no one tells you. You can be responsible and still feel restless. You can be admired and still feel unseen. You can be successful and still feel deeply unsatisfied. Not because you're broken, but because you built your life on someone else's blueprint. You mistook structure for meaning, reputation for purpose, security for soul. And when you finally arrive, after all the sacrifice, the question hits you like a punch in the dark. Why don't I feel whole? Most people ignore that feeling. They double down. More goals, more achievements, more distractions. But the void can't be filled with effort, can only be filled with truth. And the only way out is in. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what's mine to do? You stop copying meaning and start discovering it. Not in the noise, not in the metrics, but in the moments that make your soul feel real again. Because doing what's expected will keep you safe, but doing what's authentic is the only thing that will ever make you free. We live in a world addicted to being seen, not known seen. Flashes of attention that feel like significance, like proof that we matter. A like here, comment there, a view count that becomes a measure of self-worth. And at first it works, feels good. You feel visible, you feel real. But attention, Nietzsche would say, is the cheap substitute for something sacred. Meaning, because attention is fast, but meaning is slow. Attention is loud, but meaning is quiet. Attention is borrowed, but meaning must be built from the inside out. The problem is, we've mistaken performance for purpose. We post the moment instead of living it. We speak to be heard, not to tell the truth. We chase validation, then wonder why we still feel invisible after being applauded. But applause isn't understanding, and visibility isn't connection. You can be surrounded by an audience and still feel completely unseen. Nietzsche knew this. He saw the rise of spectacle over substance, identity shaped by public reaction, instead of private truth. He believed meaning comes not from how many people look at you, but from what you see. When you're alone, not when you're performing, but when you're raw, not when you're being praised, but when you're being honest. And that kind of meaning The kind that anchors you when everything goes quiet. Can't be bought. Can't be liked into existence. You have to live it, even if no one's watching. Because the truth is, you can chase attention for years and still feel hollow. You can build a persona that everyone admires and lose a self you barely got to know. The world will always reward the image. But your soul, it knows when you're faking it, and it will quietly ache until you finally return to what's real. We treat death like a thief, a shadow that sneaks in, uninvited, unfair, unkind. It takes time, people, plans. But Nietzsche saw death differently, not as the end, but as a mirror that doesn't flatter, that doesn't lie, a mirror that asks, if this life repeated forever, would you still choose it? Most people couldn't say yes, and that's where the real fear comes from. Not fear of death itself, but fear of a life unlived. We live like we have time. We postpone joy. We delay truth. We wait for permission that never comes. We pretend we're eternal, until life reminds us we're not. A diagnosis, a funeral, a moment where the world stops spinning, and suddenly we're awake, not inspired, shaken, because death has a way of cutting through all the noise. It doesn't care how many followers you have, how well you performed, how safe you played it. It only asks, did you live honestly? Did you love deeply? Did you spend this time, or waste it? And for most people, that realization comes too late. They remember what mattered only after spending decades chasing what didn't. They think they feared death, but really, they feared living wrongly, because the closer you come to the end, the louder that question gets. Was any of this mine? Not what you inherited, not what was expected, but what was yours, your truth, your calling, your one wild chance to be real. The final tragedy isn't dying. It's dying as a stranger to your own soul. But here's the gift. If you're hearing this, you're still here, and that means you still have time to live a life you wouldn't regret repeating. Everyone wants freedom, or so they say. They want to speak without fear, love without masks, live without apology. But Nietzsche knew what most don't admit. Real freedom has a price. And that price? Everything that isn't real. You want truth? You'll have to let go of approval. You want peace? You'll have to break patterns built on pretending. You want to be free? You'll have to lose the version of you that made other people comfortable. And here's what no one warns you about. That version of you is the one everyone's grown attached to. The agreeable one, the non-threatening one, the one who didn't speak too loudly, or dream too big, or say no when it costs something. So when you start walking toward freedom, don't expect applause. Expect silence. Expect resistance. Expect loss. Because freedom doesn't just liberate, it exposes. It shows you who was there for you, and who was just there for the performance. And most people, they aren't ready for that kind of loneliness. They flirt with freedom, but when the shedding begins, they panic. They reach for old roles, old habits, old people who made them feel safe in their smallness. Because the familiar, even when it's false, still feels easier than the unknown. But Nietzsche was clear. Freedom is not given. It's taken. And to take it, you'll have to stand alone. In your truth. In your integrity. In your fire. And yes, it will burn. But it won't burn you. It will burn what you're not. Because only when what's fake falls away, can what's real begin. The version of you that's waiting on the other side of fear. That's the one worth fighting for. So if you want to be free, not just liked, not just seen, but truly unshakably free, then let what needs to die, die. The people you lose, the labels that no longer fit, the habits that kept you hidden, they weren't home. They were a prison dressed like protection. And once you taste truth, you'll never want to go back.